Something happened in Boston that no one inside that stadium was prepared for. A goal was scored, a nation roared, and then in the space of a few unbearable minutes, that joy was taken away. Germany believed they had just won their place in football history. Instead, they were about to suffer one of the most stunning collapses the World Cup has ever witnessed. And what the video review revealed in those tense moments would split pundits, players, and millions of fans around the world. This is the story of the night Germany's World Cup dream was overturned by a whistle few saw coming. To understand why this moment matters so deeply, you have to understand what Germany represents in this tournament. 4 world titles, a footballing identity built on discipline, resilience, and an almost unshakable belief in their own ability to win when it matters most. For decades, Germany has been the team other nations feared in elimination football. The team that finds a way, the team that does not lose its nerve. And for a long time on this night, that reputation held strong. The match against Paraguay was supposed to be a formality, a football giant against a nation appearing in a position like this for the first time in generations. But football has a way of rewriting the script when no one expects it. Paraguay struck first. In the 42nd minute, Julio Enciso rose above the German defense and headed his side into the lead. For a moment, the stadium fell into stunned silence. The underdog was ahead, but Germany are not a team that crumbles easily. Just 12 minutes into the second half, Kai Havertz produced the equalizer, meeting a dangerous ball from Florian Wirtz to send the German bench into celebration. 1-1, game on, and that was only the beginning. As the minutes ticked away in normal time, neither side could find a winner. The tension inside the stadium grew heavier with every passing chance. Extra time was coming, and extra time, as football history has shown again and again, has a way of changing destinies forever. What happened next would become the most talked about moment of the entire tournament. In the 112th minute of extra time, Germany thought they had done it. A corner swung in. Jonathan Tah rose highest, his header crashing into the net. Players sprinted toward the corner flag. Staff leapt from the bench. For a few seconds, it felt like Germany's path forward had just been secured. But then, the referee's hand went up toward his ear, a signal that would change everything. The video assistant referee was reviewing the goal, and as fans around the world held their breath, the question became unavoidable. Had Germany really scored, or was something about to be taken away? The review centered on a single moment just before the ball crossed the line. Germany defender Waldemar Anton had positioned himself in front of Paraguay's goalkeeper Orlando Gil as the corner came in. The contact between the two of them, brief as it was, became the center of the entire controversy. Referee Jalal Jeed walked to the pitchside monitor. The stadium watched in near silence as he reviewed the footage from multiple angles, and when he made his final signal, it was Germany's celebration that was wiped away. The goal was disallowed for a foul on the goalkeeper. Germany's players stood in disbelief. What had felt like a defining moment in their tournament had been erased in an instant. But while millions of fans focused on the disallowed goal itself, another story was quietly building behind the scenes. The question of whether the decision was even correct. Almost immediately, football analysts began dissecting the replay frame by frame. Former goalkeeper Peter Schmeichel weighed in, suggesting the review had gone against Germany unfairly. Even more striking were the comments from former England captain Alan Shearer, who argued the goalkeeper reaction to the contact appeared exaggerated, calling the decision a poor one given the physical nature of the sport. Germany's own head coach Julian Nagelsmann did not hold back his frustration either, insisting that what happened did not deserve to be treated as a genuine foul at all. For a team that has built its identity on composure under pressure, this was a different kind of test, not a test of skill or tactics, but a test of how a nation responds when the result is no longer fully in their own hands. And the tension was only just beginning to build. With the goal wiped from the record, the score remained level. Extra time wore on, chances came and went. Germany pressed forward, searching for another opportunity to reclaim the lead they believed should already have been theirs. But football at its cruelest does not always offer second chances at the same moment twice. The match would not be decided in open play. It would be decided from 12 yards under the brightest lights of the tournament, with an entire nation's hopes resting on a single kick. This is where the human side of football reveals itself most powerfully. Penalty shootouts are not just tests of technique, they are tests of nerve, of memory, of the weight that history places on a player's shoulders the moment the ball is placed on the spot. For Germany, that history had always favored them. 6 wins in 7 major tournament shootouts, 6 consecutive shootout victories since a painful defeat to Czechoslovakia back in 1976. Germany had never lost a World Cup shootout. Not once, not in their entire history. That record was about to be broken. Paraguay goalkeeper Orlando Gil became the unlikely centerpiece of the night as Germany's players stepped forward one by one. Gil seemed to anticipate their intentions, diving the right way time and again. He would later describe how meticulously his team had studied every detail of every German penalty taker, a preparation that paid off when it mattered most. Germany missed twice, Paraguay missed only once, and in the most painful twist of all, it was Jonathan Tah, the very player whose disallowed header had defined the night, who stepped up and sent his penalty over the crossbar. Moments later, Paraguay's José Canal stepped forward and calmly finished the job. The South American underdogs had done what felt almost impossible. They had eliminated the 4-time world champions from the World Cup. The stadium exploded. Paraguayan players collapsed to the turf in tears, embracing one another in disbelief at what they had just achieved. For a footballing nation that had never experienced a moment of this magnitude on this stage, it was something close to a miracle. Snorts. And for Germany, it was the end of a journey that had been derailed not by a lack of fight, but by a single fiercely debated decision that may never be fully resolved in the eyes of their fans. Because here lies the deeper question this story leaves behind. Was justice truly served on that pitch, or did one contentious call alter the entire course of football history for an entire generation of German players? It is a question that will likely never have a universally accepted answer. Football has always lived in these gray areas, these split-second moments where technology meets human judgment, where a millimeter or a half-second of contact can determine which nation continues chasing a trophy and which one goes home. What makes this moment so significant is not simply who won or lost. It is what the moment represents about the modern game itself. Video review was introduced to remove controversy, to bring clarity to football's most pivotal moments. And yet here in one of the biggest matches of the tournament, it became the very source of the controversy it was designed to prevent. For older fans who remember football before the introduction of video technology, this moment carries an extra layer of meaning. It is a reminder that no matter how advanced the tools become, the human element of the game, the emotion, the unpredictability, the heartbreak can never truly be removed. Germany now faces an uncomfortable reckoning, questions about their coaching future, about whether changes are needed after a tournament exit that will be remembered for years. Nagelsmann himself addressed his future following the defeat, acknowledging that difficult conversations now lie ahead for German football. But for Paraguay, the story is only just beginning. A nation that has waited generations for a moment like this now moves forward into the next round, carrying with them belief, momentum, and the kind of self-confidence that only comes from overcoming football royalty on the biggest stage in the world. Their reward is a meeting with the winner of France and Sweden, a contest that could send them back to the very stadium where they made history, this time for a place in the quarterfinals. For Germany, there will be reflection, there will be debate that continues long after this tournament ends, and there will be the lingering question of what might have been had that header in the 112th minute been allowed to stand. Football has a way of reminding us again and again that destiny in this sport is rarely decided by the better team alone. Sometimes it is decided by a single fiercely contested moment, one that will be replayed, debated, and remembered for years to come. The road to the 2026 World Cup has already produced one of its most unforgettable storylines, and as the tournament moves forward, one thing is certain. The conversation around this moment is far from over. Perhaps the biggest surprise of this World Cup is still yet to come. But before we look ahead, we need to go back. Because to truly understand what happened in Boston, you cannot just look at the final whistle. You have to look at the small, quiet decisions made years earlier that put both of these nations on a collision course in the first place. Let's start with Paraguay, because their story is the one most casual fans know the least about. This is a country of just over 7 million people. A country whose football history is proud but modest. 3 previous World Cup appearances in the modern era where they reached the knockout stage, and a heartbreaking quarterfinal exit back in 2010. Their best finish ever. For an entire generation of Paraguayan players and fans, that 2010 squad became a kind of folklore, a team that came so close and then watched the door close. Many people inside Paraguayan football have spent the years since chasing that same feeling again, trying to recapture what made that group special. And under their current coaching setup, something had clearly shifted. This was not a Paraguay team that arrived in this tournament hoping simply to survive the group stage. This was a team that had been built deliberately and patiently around defensive discipline and the kind of suffocating organization that frustrates bigger, more talented opponents into mistakes. Orlando Gil, the goalkeeper at the center of tonight's controversy, is himself part of that story. A product of Paraguay's domestic league who fought his way into the national setup through consistency rather than flash. The kind of goalkeeper who is rarely the headline until a night exactly like this one arrives. Now, turn to Germany, and the picture looks completely different on paper, but in some ways, strangely similar underneath. This tournament was supposed to be redemption. After painful group stage exits in recent World Cup history, exits that shocked a footballing nation unaccustomed to early flights home, this German squad arrived in North America carrying the weight of expectation and the quiet desperation of a federation trying to prove that the old identity, the relentless, battle-tested German machine, still existed somewhere underneath the disappointments of the last several years. Julian Nagelsmann's appointment itself was viewed as a symbol of that reset. A younger, more progressive coach brought in to modernize a team that many felt had grown stale tactically. And for stretches of this tournament, it looked like it was working. Germany were not perfect, but they were resilient. They found ways to win ugly, which, in elimination football, is often more valuable than winning beautifully. So when these two teams walked out onto the pitch in Boston, what we were really watching was a collision between two very different versions of footballing hope. One nation trying to prove it could finally break through onto the biggest stage. One nation trying to prove its golden era had not quietly ended. Now let's go back inside that controversial VAR review itself, because there is far more nuance here than a single highlight clip can ever capture. The rule in question revolves around what is legally defined as impeding a goalkeeper's ability to play the ball. It sounds simple in a rule book. In practice, it is one of the most subjective calls in the entire sport. Defenders have made runs like Waldemar Anton's 1,000 times in World Cup history without a whistle ever being blown. Corner kicks are chaotic by nature, bodies colliding, momentum carrying players into spaces they did not intend to occupy. The question referee Jalal Jied had to answer in those tense seconds at the pitchside monitor was not simply, did contact happen? Contact happens on almost every single corner kick taken at this level. The question was, did that contact meaningfully prevent Orlando Gil from making a play he otherwise could have made? This is exactly why the football world split so sharply in the hours and days that followed. Slow the replay down frame by frame, and you can build a case for either outcome. Some camera angles show Anton's body shifting into Gil's eye line at the critical moment. Other angles suggest the goalkeeper had already lost his footing slightly before any contact occurred, raising the uncomfortable possibility that the reaction itself shaped the perception of the foul more than the contact did. This is the gray area that has haunted video review since the day it was introduced into the modern game. The technology can show you everything. It cannot tell you what to feel about what you are seeing. What made this moment sting even harder for German fans was the timing. The 112th minute, extra time, exhaustion setting in, legs heavy, decision-making for every player on the pitch becoming slower and more instinctive, rather than calculated. In moments like that, a goal does not just mean 3 points or progression to the next round. It means the release of every ounce of tension that has been building for 2 hours of football. And when that release is taken away by a review that lasts nearly 3 full minutes, the emotional whiplash for players and fans alike is almost impossible to put into words. You can see it on the faces of the German players in the replay, the shift from pure, uncontrolled joy to confusion, and finally to a kind of stunned numbness as the official's arm crosses to signal the goal will not stand. Let's talk about the penalty shootout itself in more detail now, because there is a story inside that shootout that deserves far more attention than it initially received. Orlando Gil's performance was not simply lucky guessing. According to accounts that emerged from inside the Paraguayan camp in the days following the match, their goalkeeping coaches had compiled detailed analysis on every single German player who had taken penalties at club or international level over the past several seasons. Run-up patterns, hip position, the tendency of certain players to look at one corner before striking toward the other. This is the modern reality of elite football. Even something that looks like pure instinct, a goalkeeper diving the right way under unbearable pressure, is very often the product of hours of unseen preparation that nobody outside the camp ever hears about until after the fact. And then there is the staggering historical context of what actually happened to Germany's shootout record that night. Football fans love to talk about England's historic struggles in shootouts, about the psychological scar tissue that built up over decades of penalty heartbreak for the Three Lions. Germany was supposed to be the opposite of that story. Germany was the example other nations were told to study, the model of composure under the most extreme pressure football can produce. For that record, an unbeaten record stretching back to 1976, to fall on this particular night against a nation appearing in a moment like this for the first time, added a layer of historical weight to the result that went far beyond a single match. It immediately became one of those reference points that football historians and statisticians will return to for years, a genuine changing of the guard moment, whether temporary or permanent, in the mythology of World Cup penalty shootouts. And we cannot talk about that shootout without returning to Jonathan Tah. There is a particular kind of cruelty in football that very few other sports produce in quite the same way. Tah was, for about 90 seconds, the hero of German football. His header looked in real time like the goal that would send Germany through to the quarterfinals. Teammates piled on top of him. The broadcast commentary was already shifting into celebration mode. And then, after the longest review of the match, that same header was wiped from the record entirely, as though it had never happened, to then watch that same player walk up to the penalty spot less than half an hour later, knowing the entire stadium and millions of viewers around the world were thinking about that disallowed goal in that exact moment, and to see his shot sail over the crossbar is the kind of sporting moment that writers will be returning to for years. It is almost too poetic to be real, the kind of detail that, if it appeared in a fictional sports film, audiences would say felt manufactured. But football, more than almost any other sport, has a habit of writing scripts crueler and stranger than fiction ever could. In the hours after the final whistle, reaction poured in from every corner of the football world, and it is worth pausing on just how divided that reaction truly was. Pundits who built their entire playing careers around defending, players who spent decades inside professional penalty areas, were among the most vocal in arguing the disallowed goal was an overreaction by video review, a decision that punished a kind of physical contact the sport has tolerated for generations. On the other side, supporters of the decision pointed to the explicit wording of the modern interfering with the goalkeeper rule, arguing that the entire purpose of that law is to protect goalkeepers in exactly these chaotic, high-stakes moments, and that consistency in officiating means the rule has to be applied the same way in the 112th minute of a World Cup knockout match as it would in the most routine domestic league fixture in March. Both sides have genuinely compelling arguments, and that, more than anything else, is exactly why this moment became the story of the tournament rather than simply another disputed call lost to a single news cycle. Inside the German camp, the aftermath has been just as complicated. Julian Nagelsmann, visibly emotional in his post-match comments, walked a careful line between respecting the officials and expressing real frustration at how the moment had unfolded. German football media, in the days following the exit, turned their attention toward deeper structural questions. Is this a squad that needs wholesale changes before the next major tournament? Or was this simply elite football's cruel randomness on full display, the kind of fine margin that separates triumph from heartbreak regardless of which players wear the shirt? Veterans within the squad spoke about the surreal nature of preparing for a shootout, just minutes after experiencing what felt like the high of victory and the low of having it stripped away in the same sequence of play, something very few athletes in any sport are ever asked to process in real time. For Paraguay, meanwhile, the celebrations have rippled far beyond the stadium itself. Reports from Asunción described streets filled with fans late into the night, a nation that has waited generations for a result of this magnitude finally allowing itself to believe. For a footballing culture that has so often existed in the shadow of South American giants like Brazil and Argentina, beating a four-time World Cup winning nation on the largest stage in the sport carries a significance that goes beyond the 3 points and the spot in the next round. It is validation. It is proof to an entire generation of young Paraguayan players watching at home that the gap between their nation and football's traditional superpowers is not as unbridgeable as it has so often felt. So where does this leave the broader conversation about video review in football? A conversation this single match has reignited with more intensity than almost any other incident in recent World Cup history. The technology was introduced with one central promise: to eliminate the kind of blatant officiating errors that have decided major tournaments in the past, moments fans still argue about decades later, like Diego Maradona's Hand of God, or England's disallowed goal against Germany in 2010. In many ways, video review has delivered on that promise. Clear, obvious mistakes are now corrected far more often than they once were. But what this match in Boston exposed with painful clarity is that the system was never actually designed to eliminate subjectivity from football. It was only ever designed to give officials better tools to make subjective calls. And when the margin for that subjectivity is as narrow as a goalkeeper's reaction to a split second of contact in the 112th minute of a World Cup knockout match, with an entire nation's tournament hanging in the balance, no amount of camera angles or slow-motion replays can fully remove the human judgment at the very center of the decision. That ultimately is the deeper legacy of this match, beyond the scoreline, beyond the shootout, beyond even the historic upset itself. It is a reminder that football, even in an era of unprecedented technological oversight, remains a sport decided by human beings making imperfect calls in impossible moments. And maybe that is exactly why the sport continues to capture the emotion of billions of people across the planet. Not despite the controversy, but because of it. Because in a world increasingly governed by data, algorithms, and instant replay, football has stubbornly held onto one thing technology can never fully remove: the unpredictable, unrepeatable, deeply human drama of a single moment that changes everything. As the tournament rolls on toward the quarterfinals, Paraguay carries forward not just 3 points, but a piece of history that will be retold in that country for generations. And Germany carries forward something heavier, a question that may never be fully answered. The kind of question that great footballing nations have faced before and somehow always find a way to come back from. Because if German football has proven anything across the decades, it is that this is a nation defined not by its setbacks, but by how relentlessly it responds to them. The story of this World Cup is still being written, and after a night like this one in Boston, nobody watching is quite sure anymore what page comes next.